going to the presentation, the change series. We're going to have a recap of what we did in February, the first month, our maiden edition, when we were talking about change. Okay, maybe I need to come closer, okay? I need someone close to that mic so it can be present for me. Remember last we were talking about change, and that one of the lessons we learned from change is that it's important for us to know how to change. I'll say that change is inevitable, and that is the inevitable constant of life for man. That you are not growing in height doesn't mean you are not changing. You need to see your hair how it was before, 5 years ago. I need to see how it looks like now. Even if your hair is full, I give you the next 5 years, you'll begin to know how far. Things are changing, things are evolving. Things are changing and things are evolving. Next. This is the outcome. Let's go to next. So, okay, let's go next. We were talking about change and said, what happened? This was British Airways in the days when British Airways used to fly to London and New York. This is Nigerian Airways, sorry. Not British Airways, Nigerian Airways. And this is Nigerian Airways now in Komato State. And we said what happened? All we said was what? The factor of what? Change. Change can either be positive or it could be what? Negative. May change not meet you on the negative side because it can be dangerous. Next. I would say that company died, but this company, Nestle, they are still here since 1886 and they are still alive. You know Nestle? You know Milo? Kit Kat? Maggie Cube for the ladies? They are still alive. Wow. Why are they still here? The reason is what? Change. Positive change, understanding when to move and when to make the next step. Next. And Charles Darwin said something. He said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. So the key between the difference between success and failure is your adaptability to change. That's why we saw the example of Nigerian Airways and we saw that of what? Next time. I would say for us to understand what is happening in change, we must understand the drivers of change. And it is called in the business world the VUCA problems. The VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And because these things are happening together at once, it is causing a lot of tsunami and turbulence, like a tornado. And there's the need for us to understand it. What do we need to do? That means for volatility, we need to have more clarity of vision where we're going. For uncertainty, we need to have enough understanding, deep understanding of what are the issues, what are the events, and what are the potency. Sometimes most people make mistakes from trends. Trends are what you see, but behind trends, they are what we call patterns and structures. We need to begin to go deep down, according to the iceberg theory, to begin to find out what are the patterns that is making the trend. That's how to get things done. For complexity, you need to have what is the clarity. What are we doing? For ambiguity, we need to know what we are going. Know that it is clear and it is. Let's go to the next. And we gave examples of change. Who remember Kodak? In the days when we were growing up, Kodak. Where's Kodak today? Negative example of change. Next slide. Who remembers Nokia? In the days of Nokia, this was the Nokia CEO crying. Last speech, he said, we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. I was said last month that if you don't change, change will force you to change. And it may not augur well for you, and it may be disastrous for you. That is is what happened to Nokia. Change forced them to change. And virtually in the mobile telephone market, they were the leader before. They are no longer the leader. True or false? Why? Change. Next one. What were the lessons we learned last week from change? We said that change is inevitable, but progress depends on what we do with that change. If change is inevitable, it is important for us to embrace the change and be happy with the change and move with the change. If change is inevitable, it is good for us to embrace that change, because as we embrace the change, you know what we're doing? We are making progress. We are making progress. Change can either be positive or negative. We have said that. We said that change is the inevitable constant of life. If you don't change, change will force you to change. Also, we said that there is a link between your choice, your chance, and your change. That you must make a choice to take a chance, or your life will never change. You must make a choice to take a chance, or your life will never change. Also, I got this quote from Google, and also you can amplify it to say, God gave man the power of choice so he can make his chance in life to make a change, both for now, we as believers, and also for what? Eternity. So what we see as time is a continuum of eternity. It is not separate, it's a continuum. Because what you do in this time of life determines how you end in eternity. So it's important for us to learn how to embrace change. Next slide. Let's go to the next slide. Today we'll be talking about one of the critical success factors of change. One of the critical success factors of change is leadership. Leadership is very vital. For those who are sitting at the back, maybe you want to come to the front. If you want to come closer. Leadership is very, very vital. Why is leadership vital? Everything, according to John Maxwell said, everything rises and falls on what? On leadership. Remember also that even when God created the heaven and the earth, everything was on their own until he created man to be what? The governor and the Lord of the earth. And everything was answerable to man before the fall. That tells you how God places so much emphasis on leadership. Why are we talking about leadership? Because if we don't get it right as leaders, we can't grow. We can't see progress. And the challenge with leadership is that when you get it wrong at leadership, it affects everything entirely, both in the organization and also it will also affect that in the family. That's why leadership is important. Let's go back to the Kurt-Lewin principle. The Kurt-Lewin theory says that the behavior of human being is a function of his person and the environment he finds himself. Kurt-Lewin is saying that every behavior you see is a function of the person and his environment. So what happens is that at different environments, you begin to see different disposition and different actions and behavior. This was where the leadership traits of the behavioral approach to leadership came about. That went off the norm. That we first began with the traits theory that leaders are born and are not made. But over time, we saw that that was a myth. Even though it appeared to be true, but we saw that leaders could be made. Why could leaders be made? It is because of the Kurt-Lewin theory that says that behavior is a function of person and environment, which means that behaviors can be learned and unlearned. So if behaviors can be learned and unlearned, it therefore goes to say that leadership can be learned and unlearned. It doesn't matter your background. All you need to do is to learn the skills that makes you be a leader. And in no time, you will become a leader. So it is from that background that we got the behavioral approach to leadership that says that leaders are not just born, but they can also be made. Because as leaders learn, relearn, and unlearn, we make necessary changes. That is what we see. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide just shows you the basic difference between a manager and a leader, because most times people confuse being a manager and a leader. There are three key differences between a manager and a leader. I don't want to bore you with all of this. We will send this after the presentation. First, managers resist change. Why? Because they are operation people. They want to maintain their domain. And so to take them out, because naturally, man hates change. So they want to stay in their position. But what you see a leaders do is that leaders, what? They propose change. They are dissatisfied with the status quo. Leaders are dissatisfied with status quo. Managers are satisfied with status quo. Leaders propose change. Managers resist change. Leaders create things. Managers maintain. Those are the three core attributes and differences between a manager and a leader. And I usually tell people, when you rise and you get your employment and you start working, whether you're technical or non-technical, you begin at a low level. As you rise to managerial level. From the managerial level, you need to start learning the leadership attributes so that you can rise from the managerial level to become a leader. When you become a leader, your influence and everything about you matters a lot. It affects that organization, and people are able to see that is, if you go to Microsoft today, you can see Bill Gates, true of us. If you go to Apple, even from Apple phones, you can see the attributes of Steve Jobs, true of us. Why? Because the culture and the nature of a leader comes to bear in the organization and also in its environment. That's why leadership is very important. And so today, we'll also be going to see some videos. Scroll to the next. We'll also be going to see some videos. First from Professor Gary Ahmed at Cherry Shogun. I learned about him in 2015, and I got one of his articles, and it changed everything about my life. Today I sent an email to him that you have a protege in Nigeria. That turned, and we'll be hearing from him, is one of the leading experts in strategy management. He's also an adjunct professor at the London School of Business. We'll be listening to two of his videos. One is changing the way we change. And the second one is looking at revolutionary leadership. And we'll be also listening to Professor Linda Hill from Harvard Business School. And she will be talking to us on how to manage for collective creativity. All of these videos were gotten from the YouTube. Please, instead of wasting so much time on WhatsApp, Instagram, chatting, how I look like, how they don't look like, spend time to build your life. Do you know the age of Dell when he started the Dell company at 90? Some of us are getting too old and remaining at one spot. We need to keep adding value to our life. So we'll be listening to the first one, changing the way we change. If you have any notes, what we will do is that we'll take all of Gary Arnold's video, then we'll have a short time discussion, then we'll go to that of Linda Hill, so that we can have a discussion, have question session. So let's go to that of Gary Arnold. No audio CD, please remove the audio CD. Is the USB there? Okay. Let's go to Gary Arnold, the first one, changing the way we change. Yes, the first one. Changing the way we change. Please, we need volume so that people can hear. Thank you.
Almost all the stories about deep change are stories of change in crisis. So two stories, change that's trivial and change that's dramatic. Right? Deep change, almost always a crisis, almost always takes a new leader to turn the organization around. Lou Gerstner comes in and turns IBM around, Carlos Ghosn turns Nissan around, here's Alan Mulally at Ford turning that company around, Rosemary Bravo rescued Burberry's, on and on it goes. But a turnaround is a poor excuse for timely transformation. And in fact, if I didn't know better, I would actually believe that all these smart executives who talk a lot about change, and yet who only seem to be able to change in the middle of crisis, if I didn't know better, I believe that they've been out benchmarking, how change works in a place like Zimbabwe, right? Because that's how organizations change, like a poorly governed third world dictatorship, where the pressures mount and mount and mount. Finally, there's a crisis. You depose the leader. And the more successful you've been as an organization, typically the bigger shock is required. You go back to the 1990s. You look at IBM, took a $14 billion swing in earnings for them to say, maybe we need to be a little bit less of a product company and a lot more of a services company. And so we have to change the way we change in dramatic kinds of ways. Because right now the way we change is just too expensive. Deep change is exactly how it happens in a poorly governed country. It is infrequent, it is belated, and it is convulsive. Certainly we can do better than this. Whatever the industry, the reality is whatever industry you're in, we are no longer in the knowledge economy. We are now in the creative economy. And that's going to require some huge changes in how we think. There's a project right now underway at IBM to think about how do you apply Taylorist principles to knowledge work. How do you decompose knowledge work into standard units? How do you describe somebody's skills in a kind of a standard way so I can match working people kind of fluidly around the world, hand off tasks from one country to another country with no loss of efficiency. And one of the folks leading that project said this. He said, in any company, there are a lot of jobs that are commodities. Now, I think that's true, but I also think it's enormously regrettable. But I would hope that in your company there's not a single job that's a commodity job. Because that means it's not really creating any kind of true differentiated value. And the way you get rid of commodity jobs, the way you get rid of those things is not by outsourcing or offshoring. The way you get rid of them is by dramatically increasing the creative potential and capabilities of your own people. I think organizations, we've often made a mistake because we assume that commodity jobs are filled with commodity people. That uninspiring jobs must mean uninspired people. And the problem is that as we routinized work over the last 100 years, we routinized people as well, and we forgot the fact that they're still human beings with enormous creative potential. So that's the question. How do we increase the creative content of every single job by unleashing the creative capacity of every single individual? And to do that, we're going to have to turn our management assumptions upside down. Ask them, how have you been trained as a business innovator? We haven't done it. I know of only a couple of companies that have trained literally every single employee to be a business innovator. It's no good putting up some kind of electronic suggestion box if you haven't given people the conceptual skills to innovate. Or you can ask them, as a frontline employee, you have access to all of our innovation insights from all across the company. What we know about customers and marketing, what we know about competitors in our competitor analysis unit, what we know about technology out of R&D, what we know about what's changing in the regulatory environment. Does every employee have access to anything that could help them across the company to think in a different way? Or if I'm that frontline employee and I want to experiment with a new idea, how long does it take me to get 20% of my time or 50%, a couple of $1,000s to run an experiment, buy some outside help? How many layers of bureaucracy do I go through? And I can tell you, if it takes somebody more than a week to get those permissions lined up, you're not serious about innovation. Or you could ask, is innovation performance really measured for every single employee? Do you know who's innovating in your company and who's not? So by these standards, when you ask folks these questions, it reveals almost instantly that we still haven't really built this as a capability. We're going to have to do it. And again, it's going to require a radical change in management.
Next.
I'd like to argue this morning that management, by which I mean the tools and methods we use to mobilize and organize resources to productive ends, management is in desperate need of an overhaul. And we don't often think of management as a technology, but I'm going to argue it is. Management is a set of social technologies, and if you have 2 cars in the garage, a mobile device in every pocket, if you're not spending 80% of your time growing your own food, it's largely thanks to a group of pioneers 100 years ago who said, how do we bring people together to do things at scale with ever-increasing efficiency and productivity? And arguably, this is the most important human breakthrough ever. Because all those other technologies would never have made a difference in our life if we hadn't figured out how to produce them at scale and make them affordable and so on. So for me, management is the technology of human accomplishment. And I'm going to argue we need to change it, we need to reinvent it, root and branch. That's a mighty big topic over a breakfast conversation, so I apologize in advance. This is going to be more like a movie trailer than the whole feature film, but we'll go as far as we can. Think of all these people all over the world, and if you asked any of those folks to draw a picture of their organization, my guess is it would look something like this, right? Because our organization structures haven't changed much since the pharaohs. They haven't changed much since, Henry Ford built the world's first automobiles. Most people would still draw that kind of fairly familiar lines and boxes, the thing that we call bureaucracy. And 100 years ago, this was a radical idea. Max Weber said this amazing new structure, this amazing new form of human organization is superior to any other in precision, stability, discipline, and reliability. But that diagram, those lines and boxes, that organization chart, that is not a social graph. It is not a diagram of a network. It is not a picture of a community. It is literally the exoskeleton for bureaucracy. Baked into our traditional organizations are a set of principles we inherited from the beginning of the industrial age. They are not bad principles, but they were focused on efficiency and scale. By the way, we got to still do that. And the question is, if you want a different set of principles, where do you look? I would say it's not bad to start by looking at the social web. It is adaptable, it is innovative, it is inspiring. And you start to look deep there and you find a very different kind of set of principles that are very much counterposed. And I love to unpack all these, I'm not. But unless you can start by thinking differently about principles, there's no practice that's going to solve this. The practices will come when we start to ask how do we build organizations much more open and much more transparent, where natural hierarchies, the hierarchies of meritocracy, have more influence and power than the hierarchies that are built top-down by power allocation. One of my favorite progressive companies, W.L. Gore, they call the most innovative company in the world, about $3 billion in sales, about 10,000 employees, leaders in fuel cell membranes, aortic grafts, all kinds of materials, world's best-selling guitar strings, Gore-Tex fabrics. You go into that organization, there's no formal hierarchy at all. Teams choose their own leaders. I asked somebody, how do you get to be leader at Gore? He said, your team asks you to lead them. I said, how would you know if you're a leader? You call a meeting and people show up, right? And so you think about a company in which there's not a single vice president, executive vice president, department head, and yet there's still a hierarchy of expertise. And there are leaders, you look at some of their business cards with somebody's name and leader. But you ask, where does discipline come from in an organization where people pick their own leaders? And by the way, embedded in their rules, their principles, is the belief that every commitment is voluntary. I was talking to Terry Kelly, their CEO, and I said, what happens when you bring a senior leader in from outside Gore? What's the toughest lesson they're going to have to learn? He said, number one lesson is you'll never give an order. You tell somebody what to do here, they'll never work with you again. So how do you lead without any positional authority? By the way, we're going to have to figure that out because we live in the most authority-phobic world ever. And so if your authority, if your ability to get things done is based on positional power and the sanctions that come with it, you're not really a leader, you're a bureaucrat. So what Gore said, we want leaders to really be leaders. Where does the discipline come from? Well, I'll give you one really quick example. At the end of every year at Gore, every associate is given a list of 25 or 30 names, of your peers, and you have to rank those, force ranking 1 through 25 based on how much value they created for in the organization this year. No nonsense, 6-dimensional, 5-point HR, whatever. It's like, you're adults, you know what drives value, rank these people. And they take all those rankings. Somebody maybe made 100 sales calls this year. Somebody who's working, on a 5-year quest for a new application for Gore-Tex. All these people, you're on the same list. You rank them by how much value you think they created. They take those lists, they aggregate them. That drives your compensation. 360-degree review is, kind of for wimps. 360-degree compensation, that's a little more interesting. And think about the discipline that drives. Yeah, I can say no. I can say no to any request. Gary, will you help us with this new marketing campaign? I don't have time. But at the end of the year, I know my peers will hold me accountable.
Thank you. But this is about Professor Gary Amel, and we'll leave the floor open for discussions. What did you learn? What did you gain from what was apparently? Yeah, I'm sure maybe some people thinking he's speaking so fast, but maybe I'm sure you pick 1 or 2 things from what he has said. The floor is open and the mic is free. So, who wants to go first? Who wants to say something about what you learned from those 2 videos? Okay. Please give them the mic. Thank you. Yeah. There's a mic there. Okay. Yeah. Tell us your name and what's your name.
My name is David Obadiah. I think one of the things I learned is from Gary Hands is that changes takes place at the crisis level. That is just like one of the book I read there, that an eagle, whenever it come across storms, it flies higher than the storms, and it most times get excited when storms comes. So changes can only come when you experience some crises or challenges on the way.
Okay, thanks. He was saying something that most of the smart executives actually did a transformation and a turnaround of their company during crisis time. And the truth is this: it should not have been during crisis time that you make changes. If you have done your scenario planning effectively, you should have known where you are going, where the world is going, your trend analysis with your scenario planning, and prepare yourself so that when it comes, you just shift and move. Did you hear what he said? That it took IBM $14 billion loss before they could ask themselves, maybe we don't have to settle down with these our super frame computers. We need to go and do something else. Why do you have to lose that much? You know how long it takes for you to earn money and to lose it that fast? What he's saying is that change is actually better before the crisis or turnaround time. But there are principles to it. Understanding where we are going and positioning yourself for every opportunity. So when it comes, then you can be like the eagle. Because other birds, once they are storm, they flap and fall. But the birds, the eagle know that, see, all I need to do is not to struggle with the storm. Check the direction of the storm and what do you do? And just glide, not fly. That's the difference. Thank you. Any other contribution? Sorry, the mic. Oh, there's a mic.
My name is Obadiah. What I actually picked from what he said, well, I'm a senior manager in one of the companies in town. We get to our comfort zone, but we don't have to remain in the comfort zone. It's basically a case of like, through radical, well, I'm using the word radical again, through pushing ourselves, going beyond the limits, we actually change where we are. If we look at our country, everybody comes, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this. But it's the same old thing, no radicalization. As a matter of fact, when you relate with the junior staff, their fingers actually are the pulse of the business the guys at the top only see the bottom line. But these guys know, you like to use the egos. The guys on the streets, the guys on the floor, they can actually smell what's going to happen before the guys at the top. So at the end of this day, it's actually more a case of every manager, every aspiring manager, don't just be boxed into, oh, this is my role and so on and so forth. Think beyond it. And like Deacon Timothy mentioned just before we started, that Psalm 82 is very, very strong. We have capacity beyond what we can think. Because it's when we actually get in there, we just realize that, oh, I can do this, I can do this. Just before I finish, I worked for a company that actually went extinct, Nortel Network, some years ago. Back then, pioneer company, leader, everything. But guess what? Internet came, things happened. There was supplying a lot of internet companies, but those companies went bust. And guess what? The company just had to fall. That was what happened. So they could not see beyond the now. So we need to see beyond the now. When we see beyond the now, we're planning for the future. And then when the future comes, we are ready for it. That's basically it. Nokia did not see the future. They only saw the now. Back then, they were the top selling company. BlackBerry came. No, you know who wants to check mails on phones. Now it's standard. You even get every Otiba handset. Email is standard.
Thank you. Two things you said, which is very valid, and I'm thank you for that. There's the need, you heard when I was talking about, there's the need for us to reinvent even management. Because the management principles that we're working with were the management principles of the 1911. The Frederick Taylor principles of scientific management. I mean, after 100 years, that's what we're still doing. We need to review it. That's why he talked about that you need to go. Did you see here when we were talking about the organization that they go to the shop floor and understand what people are doing, and they have 360 compensation, 360 appraisal. In fact, you will hear another one from Professor Linda Hill that it is the subordinate that now rate the managers in serious company. Why? Because they are the sharp edge of customer and feeling the pulse. So they create the environment to get the best out of them. And as for managers, go beyond your circle of office. It's not about position. Go as a person. Let your aura be able to create that wave for you that you command people respect. Professor Dr. Hamel said something. He said people can come to work and leave their brain at home. They open their system. We do this, we do this. He said, but creativity cannot be commanded. It is influenced. You bring creativity, innovation by influence as you create that atmosphere and that context for the employees to drive. So as managers, go beyond come out from your castle and come down to the nitty-gritty and flow with people. You will get the best of it. I did a case study when I was doing my MBA with one of these companies, one of these Marriott Hotel, and with another hotel in Dubai. All of the idea that changed that hotel in Dubai came from the attendant. You'll be shocked. Not from the GM, not from the manager. In fact, the lady, the GM said that all of the $5 million we spent in changing the rooms and upholstery, nobody ever commented on it. But you know what? The attendant by the swimming pool told them, these people come to swim and we still ask them to buy water. Why don't you make it free for them? And the attendants in the reception noticed that every morning, because in Dubai most times it's bread and breakfast. They notice that most people go in the evening out to go and buy food. And so you know what they tell them? You don't need to go. The amount you have paid covers also your dinner. People were wild. I'm saying those ideas did not come from the top. It came from the shop floor. Those who had contact with the customers. Direct feedback to make it. And today, that hotel is doing extremely well. Thank you. So we'll go to Professor Linda Yee, talking about how to have a creative genius and how to have engagement. And what he talked about on the engagement, we'll begin to see. Let's go to Linda Yee, the one from TED. Linda Yee. Yes, thank you.
I'm a business professor whose ambition has been to help people learn to lead. But recently I've discovered that what many of us think of as great leadership does not work when it comes to leading innovation. I'm an ethnographer. I use the methods of anthropology to understand the questions in which I'm interested. So along with three co-conspirators, I spent nearly a decade observing up close and personal exceptional leaders of innovation. We studied 16 men and women located in 7 countries across the globe, working in 12 different industries. In total, we spent hundreds of hours on the ground, on site, watching these leaders in action. We ended up with pages and pages and pages of field notes that we analyzed to look for patterns in what our leaders did. The bottom line, if we want to build organizations that can innovate time and again, we must unlearn our conventional notions of leadership. Leading innovation is not about creating a vision and inspiring others to execute it. But what do we mean by innovation? An innovation is anything that is both new and useful. It can be a product or service, it can be a process or a way of organizing. It can be incremental or it can be breakthrough. We have a pretty inclusive definition. How many of you recognize this man? Put your hands up. Keep your hands up if you know who this is. How about these familiar faces? So from your show of hands, it looks like many of you have seen a Pixar movie, but very few of you recognize Ed Catmull, the founder and CEO of Pixar, one of the companies I had the privilege of studying. My first visit to Pixar was in 2005 when they were working on Ratatouille, that provocative movie about a rat becoming a master chef. Computer-generated movies are really mainstream today, but it took Ed and his colleagues nearly 20 years to create the first full-length CG movie. In the 20 years hence, they produced 14 movies, and I was recently at Pixar, and I'm here to tell you that number 15 is sure to be a winner. When many of us think about innovation, though, we think about an Einstein having an aha moment. But we all know that's a myth. Innovation is not about solo genius. It's about collective genius. Let's think for a minute about what it takes to make a Pixar movie. No solo genius, no flash of inspiration produces one of those movies. On the contrary, it takes about 250 people 4 to 5 years to make one of those movies. To help us understand the process, an individual in the studio drew a version of this picture. He did so reluctantly because it suggested that their process was a neat series of steps done by discrete groups. Even with all those arrows, he thought it failed to really tell you just how iterative, interrelated, and frankly messy their process was. Throughout the making of a movie at Pixar, the story evolves. So think about it. Some shots go through quickly. They don't all go through in order. It depends on how vexing the challenges are that they come up with when they're working on a particular scene. So if you think about that scene in Up, where the boy hands the piece of chocolate to the bird, that 10 seconds took one animator almost 6 months to perfect. The other thing about a Pixar movie is that no part of the movie is considered finished until the entire movie wraps. So partway through one production, an animator drew a character with an arched eyebrow that suggested a mischievous side. When the director saw that drawing, he thought it was great, it was beautiful, but he said, you gotta lose it. It doesn't fit the character. 2 weeks later, the director came back and said, let's put in those few seconds of film. Because that animator was allowed to share what we refer to as his slice of genius, he was able to help that director reconceive the character in a subtle but important way that really improved the story. So what we know is, at the heart of innovation is a paradox. You have to unleash the talents and passions of many people, and you have to harness them into a work that's actually useful. Innovation is a journey. It's a type of collaborative problem solving, usually among people who have different expertise and different points of view. Innovations rarely get created full-blown. As many of you know, they're the result usually of trial and error. Lots of false starts, missteps, and mistakes. Innovative work can be very exhilarating, but it also can be really downright scary. So when we look at why it is that Pixar is actually able to do what it does, we have to ask ourselves, what's going on here? For sure, history, and certainly Hollywood, is full of star-studded teams that have failed. Most of those failures are attributed to too many stars or too many cooks, if you will, in the kitchen. So why is it that Pixar, with all of its cooks, is able to be so successful time and time again? When we studied an Islamic bank in Dubai, or a luxury brand in Korea, or a social enterprise in Africa, we found that innovative organizations are communities that have three capabilities: creative abrasion, creative agility, and creative resolution. Creative abrasion is about being able to create a marketplace of ideas through debate and discourse. In innovative organizations, they amplify differences, they don't minimize them. Creative abrasion is not about brainstorming, where people sort of suspend their judgment. No, they know how to have very heated but constructive arguments to create a portfolio of alternatives. Individuals in innovative organizations learn how to inquire, they learn how to actively listen. But guess what? They also learn how to advocate for their point of view. They understand that innovation rarely happens unless you have both diversity and conflict. Creative agility is about being able to test and refine that portfolio of ideas through quick pursuit, reflection, and adjustment. It's about discovery-driven learning, where you act as opposed to plan your way to the future. It's about design thinking, where you have that interesting combination of the scientific method and the artistic process. It's about running a series of experiments, not a series of pilots. Experiments are usually about learning. When you get a negative outcome, you're still really learning something that you need to know. Pilots are often about being right. When they don't work, someone or something is to blame. The final capability is creative resolution. This is about doing decision-making in a way that you can actually combine even opposable ideas to reconfigure them in new combinations to really produce a solution that is new and useful. So when you look at innovative organizations, they never go along to get along. They don't compromise. They don't let one group or one individual dominate, even if it's the boss, even if it's the expert. Instead, they have developed a rather patient and more inclusive decision-making process that allows for both-and solutions to arise and not simply either-or solutions. So these three capabilities are why we see that Pixar is able to actually do what it does. Let me give you another example, and that example is the infrastructure group of Google. The infrastructure group of Google is the group that has to keep the website up and running 24/7. So when Google was about to introduce Gmail and YouTube, they knew that their data storage system was inadequate. The head of the engineering group and the infrastructure group at that time was a man named Bill Colvin. Bill and his leadership team, who we refer to as his brain trust, had to figure out what to do about this situation. So they thought about it for a while. And instead of creating a group to really tackle this task, they decided to allow groups to emerge spontaneously around different alternatives. Two groups coalesced. One became known as Bigtable, the other became known as Build It From Scratch. Bigtable proposed that they build on the current system. Build It From Scratch proposed that it was time for a whole new system. Separately, these two teams were allowed to work full-time on their particular approach. In engineering reviews, Bill described his role as injecting honesty into the process by driving debate. Early on, the teams were encouraged to build prototypes so that they could, quote, bump them up against reality and discover for themselves the strengths and weaknesses of their particular approach. When Build It From Scratch shared their prototype with the group whose beepers would have to go off in the middle of the night if something went wrong with the website, they heard loud and clear about the limitations of their particular design. As the need for a solution became more urgent, and as the data or the evidence began to come in, it became pretty clear that the big table solution was the right one for the moment. So they selected that one. But to make sure that they did not lose the learning of the Build It From Scratch team, Bill asked 2 members of that team to join a new team that was emerging to work on the next generation system. Now this whole process took nearly 2 years, but I was told that they were all working at breakneck speed. Now early in that process, one of the engineers had gone to Bill and said, "We're all too busy for this inefficient system of running parallel experiments." But as the process unfolded, he began to understand the wisdom of allowing talented people to really play out their passions. And he admitted, if you had forced us to all be on one team, we might have focused on proving who was right and winning, and not on learning and discovering, really what was the best answer for Google. So why is it that Pixar and Google are able to innovate time and again? It's because they've mastered the capabilities required for that. They know how to do collaborative problem solving, they know how to do discovery-driven learning, and they know how to do integrated decision making. Now some of you may be sitting there and saying to yourselves right now, we don't know how to do those things in my organization. So why do they know how to do those things at Pixar, and why do they know how to do those things at Google? Well, many of the people that worked for Bill told us, in their opinion, Bill was one of the finest leaders in Silicon Valley. And we completely agree. The man is a genius. Leadership is the secret sauce. But it's a different kind of leadership, not the kind many of us think about when we think about great leadership. One of the leaders I met with early on said to me, "Linda, I don't read books on leadership. All they do is make me feel bad. In the first chapter, they say I'm supposed to create a vision. But if I'm trying to do something that's truly new, I have no answers. I don't know what direction we're going in, and I'm not even sure I know how to figure out how to get there." For sure, there are times when visionary leadership is exactly what is needed. But if we want to build organizations that can innovate time and again, we must recast our understanding of what leadership is about. Leading innovation is about creating a space where people are willing and able to do the hard work of innovative problem solving. So, at this point, some of you may be wondering, well, what does that leadership really look like? Well, at Pixar, they understand that innovation takes a village. So the leaders focus on building a sense of community and building those 3 capabilities. How do they define leadership? They say leadership is about creating a world to which people want to belong. What kind of world do people want to belong in at Pixar? A world where you're living at the frontier. So what do they focus their time on? Not on creating a vision. Instead, they spend their time thinking about how do we design a studio that has the sensibility of a public square so that people will interact. Let's put in a policy that anyone, no matter what their level or role, is allowed to give notes to the director about how they feel about a particular film. You know what? What can we do to make sure that all the disruptors, all the minority voices in this organization speak up and are heard? And finally, let's bestow credit in a very generous way. So I don't know if you've ever looked at the credits of a Pixar movie, but the babies born during the production are listed there. And how did Bill think about what his role was? Bill said, I lead a volunteer organization. Talented people don't want to follow me anywhere. They want to co-create with me the future. My job is to nurture the bottom up and not let it degenerate into chaos. How do you see his role? I'm a role model, I'm a human glue, I'm a connector, I'm an aggregator of viewpoints. I'm never a dictator of viewpoints. Advice about how you exercise the role? You know what? Hire people who argue with you. And guess what? Sometimes it's best to be deliberately fuzzy and vague. So some of you may be wondering now, what are these people thinking? They're thinking, you know what? I'm not the visionary, I'm the social architect. I'm creating the space where people are willing and able to share and combine their talents and passions. So if some of you are worrying now that you don't work at a Pixar or you don't work at a Google, I want to tell you there's still hope. We studied many organizations that were really not organizations you think of as ones where a lot of innovation happens. We studied a general counsel in a pharmaceutical company who had to figure out how to get the outside lawyers, 19 competitors, to collaborate and innovate. We studied the head of marketing at a German automaker where fundamentally they believed that it was the design engineers, not the marketeers, who were allowed to be innovative. We also studied Vineet Nair at HCL Technologies, an Indian outsourcing company. When we met Vineet, his company was about, in his words, become irrelevant. We watched as he turned that company, and really, to a global dynamo of IT innovation. At HCL Technologies, like at many companies, the leaders have learned to see their role as setting direction and making sure that no one deviated from it. What he did is tell them it was time for them to think about rethinking what they were supposed to do. Because what was happening is that everybody was looking up, and you weren't seeing the kind of bottom-up innovation we saw at Pixar or Google. So they began to work on that. They stopped giving answers. They stopped trying to provide solutions. Instead, what they did is they began to see the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the young sparks, the people who were closest to the customers, as the source of innovation. They began to transfer the organization's growth to that level. In Vineet's language, this was about inverting the pyramid so that you could unleash the power of the many by loosening the stranglehold of the few and increase the quality and the speed of innovation that was happening every day. For sure, Vineet and all the other leaders that we studied were in fact visionaries. For sure, they understood that that was not their role. So I don't think it is accidental that many of you did not recognize Ed. Because Ed, like Vineet, understands that our role as leaders is to set the stage, not perform on it. So if we want to invent a better future, and I suspect that's why many of us are here, then we need to reimagine our task. Our task is to create the space where everybody's slices of genius can be unleashed and harnessed and turned into works of collective genius. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want someone else who has not spoken to this to be able to give. So, thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Victor. Amongst other things, what struck me the most was bottom-up principle management, whereby you don't pay too much attention to the top and take your strength from the bottom. The idea is, what I was able to get is that most times, like my brother rightly said, the pulse of the company is usually felt from the bottom. That is where you basically get your money from. So the top people most times, they concentrate on is us or our management. But the truth is, the power of the company comes from the bottom. So redirecting the idea of leadership and management and focusing more on the majority, because in most companies, when I say 90% of the company is usually from the bottom. So then you have like maybe out of 1,000 you have like maybe 500 low-level staff, maybe 200 mid-level, maybe 100 top management. Now, how are you able to grow the company? Most managers, even in the country, the way the country is run, most people at the top, they believe it's all about them. But then innovation comes from the younger minds. So I feel that that's a take-home for me. And then for people that want to grow their company, the ability to take out the attention from the top and place more attention on the bottom so you can grow the company.
Thank you. Okay, rightly said, and you heard how to invert the pyramid. This is also in collaboration with what Professor Gary Ahmed said, that we need to reinvent management. And in fact, if you read the article that I read, 2015, from Gary Ahmed, he said large organizations of all sorts suffer from congenital diseases that no incremental therapy can cure. He said because they are sterile, insipid, and they are not sensitive. He said so you need a fundamental paradigm shift, that we need to go beyond the pyramid, that's inversing the pyramid, and we need to go beyond conformance. Because if you ask yourself, the key thing, that structure, it inhibits innovation and creativity. It was working for them in the 1911 when it was done by the Frederick Taylor Science Principle. It's no longer relevant now. I just heard from Gary Ahmed. He said we have moved from the knowledge economy to the creative economy. That tells you that that is key. And that's very important. That's why as we come, we'll also be talking about structure, because we have like 4 or 3 critical success factors for change. One is leadership, one is culture, another one is structure. But you need to begin with leadership, because leadership affects structure and culture. My brother behind wants to say something.
I have a paradigm shift about what my definition previously was for missionary leadership. One thing she said was that sometimes people think that they must have this amazing vision. And that research has shown that from Google and Pixar she was talking about, that these people were basically enablers. They were catalysts to allow people's ideas and visions and different, whatever it is that they were holding. So they were able to bring all of that together and create a common vision. I think that's what's missing in most organizations, where there's division. The leadership has one vision, the middle management has another, the bottom layer has another vision. So that we are not all working together. It is in that, it's being able to take other people's vision and bring it together, and everyone go to the same place. That I see where that creativity and change happens.
Thank you very much. Well, we decided that Covenant Business Meeting will be doing things differently. I will say this combination of spiritual and business. And when we're talking about business, we will be bringing to the fore renowned professors who have done a lot of things, and so that we can look at their principles, so that we can apply to it. Because see, what you see happening in their country can happen in any country. You can effect a change anywhere you are. And don't have this idea that innovation has to be for product, or it has to be R&D. No. What is Starbucks? Innovation in services. Simple. Are they the maker of coffee? No. They're only serving coffee in a different way. And they're making what? Billions. What Nigeria should be doing is that if you don't have so much of R&D or production, you major in your distribution network and major in your services and make it impeccable. That's what we'll be doing. So some of the things is to give teams to say this is where we're going, and this is the direction, and this is what we need to do. Thank you so much for coming, and it's a privilege. We would like to close, but we would like to pray that Lord, make us